Bend Around the Wind by Skylia. Chapter 48. Hatchet, Part 3. You don't mind switching places, do you, Lep? Hatchet asked Juyu without taking his eyes off the entrance. Juyu was not one to argue when there was obviously something dangerous happening, so she stood up to let Hatchet out. The tension in Hatchet's shoulders was obvious for Loki, even if his face remained calm. It was one of Hatchet's finer skills to hide how much something was affecting him. Sometimes even Loki had trouble pinpointing how worried or angered he actually was. Many said in Asgard that the older an elf was, the more they resembled a marble statue. Most Aesir never bothered to learn how to mask their emotions, but elves, on the other hand, were spectacularly good at it. Hatchet was not that old, so he still had his tells. You had to know him to recognize them, though. Right now, he seemed more agitated than worried, so Loki was not concerned. Soon enough, two bulky men appeared by their table. One of them a blue native, the other slightly brown, and while they tried their best to hover menacingly over the sitting Hatchet, he paid them no mind. He even averted his gaze from the entrance. "Pano wants to have a word with you," one of them said after a few moments of silence. "Then he can come down to District 7 just like everyone else," Hatchet told them. "Not up for a debate," the blue one said. "No, it really isn't," Hatchet said. "Now get lost, I'm busy." "It was not satisfied with equality," the brown one added. Hatchet sighed dramatically. "I do not renegotiate," he said, "especially not after delivery. He was the one being stingy about the original price, so he's going to have to deal with the lower quality. If he wants something better, he can buy from the core, or he's going to have to pay more. That's how it works. Then get lost." The two men looked at one another for a moment, then the blue one walked back towards the entrance. The other remained a few feet away from their table, scowling at Hatchet. Loki raised an eyebrow when Hatchet looked at him. The elf just rolled his eyes and shook his head. "I'd really appreciate it if you'd tell us now if we have to get out of Dodge," Stark said. "Do not worry," Hatchet said. "I'll handle it." When the blue men walked back to their table, Loki was immediately certain that this was not going to end peacefully. From the look on Hatchet's face, he knew that as well. "Pano does not like to wait," he said. Stark silently snorted at the dramatically delivered line. Hatchet's eyes glinted with amusement as he glanced at him. Then he turned his gaze back on the glowering man. "You either do what you're told or we're just gonna take what we need." There was no mistaking the way Hatchet clenched his jaw this time, nor how his eyes hardened at the words. He stood up with his usual grace and stepped closer to the blue man. He was bulkier, but Hatchet was taller, and he of course used that to his advantage. He moved until he was inches away from the other man and stared down at him with unblinking eyes. Their noses almost touched, but the man squared his shoulders and did not step back, even if he looked like he wanted to. "Did you really just threaten to steal from me?" he asked evenly. "I do not think you thought this all the way through." It was almost admirable how the man held his ground, rapidly blinking up at Hatchet and swallowing constantly. "You should have treated Pano with more respect then." "Respect has to be earned," Hatchet answered, "and he did not earn it." "Renegotiate. This is your last warning." Hatchet narrowed his eyes, and Loki knew that expression. He saw it plenty of times. Hatchet was at the end of his, and admittedly very limited, patience. Loki resisted the urge to sigh. Hatchet tilted his head to the side to look over the shoulder of the man in front of him. "Hey, Pano!" He raised his voice. "If you're so eager to use your mouth, why don't you come over here and suck me?" Classy as ever. The two henchmen gaped at him in utter shock for a moment or two, and even some part of the tavern fell completely silent. "Excuse me for a moment," Hatchet said, looking back at them at the table, and a second later he was jumped by the brown-skinned man from behind. Hatchet grabbed hold of him and tossed him over his shoulder, then the blue-skinned one smashed into him from the side, pushing them away from their booth. Juyu was watching the fight, and even Stark turned around on the bench to be able to see what was happening. "So, do you wanna, interfere or something?" he asked. Thoughtful of him to ask, really, even if he did not look like he wanted to move. "No," Loki answered. "You don't seem surprised," Juyu observed. "No, I'm really not." Loki said, and he really wasn't. Hatchet was very likely to try and beat some sense into someone when he thought his words would fall on deaf ears. This was obviously the case here. He finally turned around as well when he heard the sound of cracking wood. Some chairs got broken in the fight, so it seemed. Hatchet had the blue-skinned man by the hair slamming him face first into a table. The elf had a cut on his lip, but he looks like he had everything under control. He would be outraged if someone helped him when he was not in mortal peril, the bull-headed idiot. He quickly let go of the blue man when the brown attacked him again. He spun around to grab hold of his clothes and kneed him in the gut, making him double over in pain. Then he followed up with a swift kick to the chest. See what I mean about kicking being better than punching? Loki said, turning to Juyu. She nodded, not taking her eyes off the tussle. Some glasses and plates got smashed as the blue one got up again. Not that I'm an expert, Stark said, but aren't elves supposed to be, gentle and elegant? You know, glamorous and all that? Stark almost winced when Hatchet had a pitcher thrown at him. Generally, Loki agreed. He's a special case. I thought elves were supposed to be gentle, Loki said as he was hauled over a giant fallen tree trunk, none too gently. I thought Aesir was supposed to be tall and fearless, he replied. Just keep walking, kid. I am not afraid, he declared, and do not talk to me in this manner. I am a prince of Asgard, the nephew of your king. You know what you are, out in these woods? A tasty meal on two legs. So let's winding and more walking, all right? The sun is setting soon. If my uncle hears about this, he is going to be horrified that his nephew was stupid enough to get lost here of all places, the elf told him. You are going to be rewarded for putting up with you. You can't just watch me. Loki huffed and fell silent. They walked quietly for a while, climbing over giant tree roots and cutting through thick bushes. The elf did not seem to mind, but he was tall, even taller than Uncle Frey. Loki's clothes, on the other hand, constantly got caught in branches and spiky leaves. He knew his hair was full with dirt and twigs, too. He must have looked completely ridiculous. Even the thought of having to walk into the palace looking like this was horrifying. Empty-handed to boot, such a disgrace. How did you get lost, anyway? The elf asked. It was the first time he spoke to Loki without being prompted. I was not lost, Loki told him stubbornly. I was just hidden from others. Of course, what was I thinking? So why were you hidden from others in the woods? Loki did not want to talk about it. It was not something to talk about, especially considering his other failure. What right did some scruffy elf have to ask questions like this? He didn't even look like the other elves. His hair was shorter and tightly braided. His clothes were worn, and he didn't even carry a bow. What sort of elf didn't carry a bow? Strange ones. Elves love their bows. Silence all of a sudden? I wish I knew a few hours ago that this was the way to shut you up. I was hunting, Loki declared. The elf stopped and turned to look at him. With your bare hands? No, I had weapons with me. And now they're hidden from others, too. Loki glared at him viciously, but the elf seemed unfazed. He turned around and continued walking. Loki had to jog to keep up with him and his long legs. So tell me then, the elf spoke again, why would a little princeling like you come out to the woods alone to hunt? It was a good question, but Loki did not have an answer that would not make him sound like a foolish child. It was irresponsible to come out alone, but it was not like anyone would have agreed to take him. It is none of your concern, he said then. Did you run away? The elf asked. No, I did not run away. I told you I was hunting. Why not go hunting with the rest of the court? They do that quite a lot as far as I know. Because they wouldn't take me, Loki snapped angrily. Only my brother was allowed to go. They just told me that I can go when I'm bigger and strong like Thor. It is not fair. He's not even that taller than me. He's just stronger, but I'm quicker. I could have gone with them. Now everyone's praising him for that stupid doe he killed. I could have killed a doe or even a boar. I'm better at throwing spears than he is because he always practices with swords and maces. So you're angry at your brother? No, he wanted me to go. He's really happy that he killed that doe too, but if I could have gone with them, I could have killed something as well, and we could both celebrate. Deciding to hunt out here alone was still not very bright, the elf told him. I did not think it through. Don't you dare laugh. I won't. Then he really didn't. He just kept walking in silence as he did before. It made Loki all too aware of the noises around them. As the sun was going down, most birds fell silent, while the insects became louder, and once in a while he would hear something larger moving among the trees, not that far away from them. He was glad they kept their distance, whatever they were. "Do you live here, then?" he asked when he could not stand the quiet any longer. "Yes!" "With your family?" "No." "How come?" "I don't have one." "Oh, why don't you live in the town with the other elves, then? Don't you get lonely here?" The elf stopped to look at him for a moment, but he only said, "Keep walking." "You're the grumpiest elf I have ever seen," Loki remarked. Elves were supposed to be fun. Every elf he met was happy and smiling all the time except this one. "And you're the brightest Aesir I have," he answered. "You have not met my brother yet." The elf suddenly started laughing, his voice ringing loud and bright among the trees. He stopped to look at Loki again, eyes twinkling with amusement, but he did not say anything. He just shook his head and moved forward. It did not take much longer until Loki spotted the towers of Frey's castle in the distance. He ran forward when he did, eager to be out of the darkening forest, finally. He only stopped after he was walking on a familiar trail, but then when he turned around, the elf was gone. No sight of him anywhere. It was truly getting dark, so Loki turned to run back to the palace, only standing still for a few moments to wonder why the elf did not come to get some sort of reward. He almost managed to sneak back without being detected, but his mother caught him just outside his room. She was not happy about his dirty, torn clothing at all. He told her that he was only at the edge of the forest because there was no reason to worry her, and he did not want anyone to know that he got lost either. That part was embarrassing. A large man, who must have been Pano, approached Hatchet just as the blue-skinned man finally stayed down on the floor. Hatchet had his full attention on him by the time he got there. That was why it did not turn into another fight. When the man lunged at him, Hatchet grabbed his arm and twisted it around until Pano's shoulder was at an unnatural angle. He let out a shout of pain immediately, trying to get out of the elf's tight grip. Hatchet did not let go and kicked his feet out from under him. The man hit the floor heavily, but turned around to reach for his gun right away. Hatchet was faster, and the next moment he had his knee on the other's throat and his own gun in his hand. "Don't!" Hatchet warned him, and Pano moved his hand away from his holster. The elf was only slightly out of breath, even if his face was covered in small bruises and cuts, blood dirtying his pale skin. The tavern was still mostly silent, watching the spectacle without anyone interrupting. Hatchet shoved the gun in Pano's face, the barrel literally touching the larger man's mouth. Considering his earlier taunt, the gesture certainly did not go unnoticed. Not by Loki, anyway. "I don't think I need to tell you, but we won't be making business any longer," Hatchet said. "And the next time you get any ideas about messing with me, I want you to remember this exact moment. I want you to keep in mind that the only reason I don't pull this trigger right now is because I don't want to make Hanny's floor dirty with your useless brain. Do we understand each other?" Pano nodded after a moment, so Hatchet reached down to take his gun away before getting off of him. "Now get out, or Vorlu will hear that you're in a district again you don't belong to." The man got up, and so did his two henchmen, only slightly supporting one another. Hatchet stared after them until they were out of the tavern. Like on cue, the chatter of people started up again inside. Everyone was turning their attention away from Hatchet and back to their own business. Hatchet let out a sigh and walked back to their booth, holstering his gun and dropping the other one down on the table. "Well, that was enlightening," Stark remarked before picking up the gun with a curious head tilt. "I'll say," Hatchet nodded, wiping some blood from the corner of his mouth. "Never trust anyone from the District 4 Syndicate. We should leave." Before they could move, the girl from before was stomping towards them, glaring at Hatchet. Loki did not pay attention to the argument, but pushed at Stark to get him to move before he got too wrapped up inspecting the gun. "I couldn't help but notice that he still did not tell us how he found you here," Stark said. Loki wrapped his cloak around his shoulders and looked at Hatchet as he talked with the barmaid. "He will tell us," Loki reassured him. "It's not like you to be so trusting," Juyu told him. "I know him. He will tell us," he repeated. Stark looked at him, and it seemed like he had something to say, but he just glanced at Hatchet and stayed silent. But it was not like Loki did not already know what he wanted to say. They walked in silence back on the cold street, the crowd only slightly smaller than it was before. Hatchet was busy cleaning the blood from his face with a handful of snow he grabbed as soon as they were out of the tavern. He did not ask the gun back from Stark, either, so he probably did not mind him keeping it. "I don't believe in accidents," Loki said quietly then. "How did you just find me on a street like this?" "Not accidentally," Hatchet agreed. "I always keep an eye on the District 10 to 12 docks. The ships there are always non-military freelancers, more likely up for trade and such outside of the core. So when I caught a glimpse of you, what I thought was a glimpse of you, I wanted to be sure. I actually ran over from the other side of the city." "That does not explain why you're in this city, this planet," Loki told him. "Trading routes," Hatchet said simply. "Sarka is a node, a major port planet. Everything that comes from the Draco and Dorado galaxies stops here first, and Dalekania has the biggest interstellar traffic." Loki frowned, trying to make sense of that explanation. "Did you expect me to show up here? That doesn't make sense." "Well, there might have been a locator spell involved in making an educated guess." "What?" Loki stopped to face him. Stark and Juyu stopped as well right away, turning back towards to them. "You were searching for me? Why?" "What do you mean, why?" "It means why. Why were you searching for me?" "Because 5 bloody decades, Loki!" Hatchet yelled suddenly, getting a few looks from some pedestrians, so he lowered his voice again. "Because what else was I supposed to do? First, I was just trying to contact you somehow, but you were not in Asgard, you were bloody nowhere! I had to find you! Do you have any idea how much time and money it took me to get the ingredients for a spell strong enough to search as far as possible? 3 years! You hear me? Just to get everything together, just to be able to try. So when, some months ago, I finally knew where you were, I came here. This was the closest planet to your location. I asked around, nobody ever seen anyone who looked like you, so I assumed you were on your way here. So I waited, even though I hate big cities." "But why did you—" "I had to find you, you know that," Hatchet argued. "I really don't," Loki said. He was still trying to wrap his mind around the words just spoken to him, familiar and foreign at the same time. He was not who he used to be, and he was always reminded of that, usually in the most cruel ways. This was not cruel, but it still twisted something in his gut. "You were lost, so I had to find you," Hatchet told him, like it should have been obvious. "That's how it works." Such an absurd thing to say. He really did not think it still works like that. He was no child. He did not need to be found. Those who searched had malicious intents, wanted to use him, break him, and imprison him. They did not look just for the sake of knowing where he was. But Hatchet did not know. Not any of it. Nothing of what happened. So of course he would. It was a harsh reminder of all the things he turned his back on. "I was not lost," he said in the end. "Just hidden from others?" Hatchet asked in return, and it made Loki up out a small laugh before he sobered again. "I had reasons to hide." Hatchet opened his mouth to ask, but Stark interrupted. "We really need to get back to the dock, land the ship, get things started," he said. He had a displeased frown on his face that Loki was not really familiar with. But he was right nonetheless. They had a lot to do. They couldn't waste more time on words, not right now. "Yes, we should get back," he agreed. Stark looked at him and Hatchet, then turned his back and started walking. Juyu shot him a confused look, but followed the man. "He's lucky he's handsome," Hatchet remarked, staring after Stark. "He's more than that," Loki corrected right away, then started walking as well. "And don't even think about it." They were far enough that Stark and Juyu probably did not hear their conversation. "Ooh, good for you, my prince. He looks exciting," Hatchet decided with a smirk. "And that's a fine ass." "Just shut up," Loki told him, but the elf just laughed, of course. No surprise there. "Admit it, you missed me," he said with a wide grin. Oh, no, Loki was most definitely not going to do that.